Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud Live. My name is Ricardo Zulueta, and I'm your host. This was made possible by our Start Day One, which is a nonprofit foundation for mental health and suicide prevention, where we have a more proactive approach in helping people rather than being reactive and waiting for symptoms of mental health issues or suicidal tendencies. So the reason we do these shows is because of our proactive approach, meaning we want to be able to reach out rather than waiting for people to reach out to us. Our biggest thing that we do and our mission is to help change people's perspectives from dreaming of one day to starting day one. Day one means there's a day two, day three, day four. So really, because everyone is so overwhelmed with, what how much they have to change or do, but really they just don't know where to start. And we believe that being more proactive about things is actually the only way to do preventative things. Just like diabetes, obesity, and everything else, you need a proactive approach to be effective. So today we actually have a special guest, and we're always bringing different guests on here. In this episode of Thinking Out Loud Live, we actually have invited Michael Herst to discuss his incredible story of beating the odds after he was actually diagnosed to be stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He's the host and producer of One More Thing Before You Go podcast, author, screenwriter, director, and retired police sergeant. He holds an MA in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on performance and digital media, and Bachelor of Science in Business Management. He's also a husband, a father, and an animal advocate and lover, and a vegan who has managed his disease with a naturopathic way of life. He has a real passion for the beauty of nature, art, creative arts, and healing, writing, movies, and TV. And yes, so without further ado, let me introduce you to Michael Herst. Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm doing outstanding.
Great. So I did a quick intro to you. Where are you calling from again?
I live north of Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay,
We're,
great. So I did a quick intro about you. I mean, we're ready to hear your story here. But before we do that, let's kind of backtrack a little bit, get people to know you. Where you're coming from, what your story is about, what happened, and then where you are today.
it's kind of a unique, but not an old story. It's one of my own, actually. Unlike other people that may have gone through it at the same time. I was a police sergeant. I was a career law enforcement officer, and 1997, 98 area, the end of 97, in the early part of 98, I was involved in an on-duty incident that caused me to retire with a medical disability. I had a suspect that basically did not want to be arrested, and he kind of pinned me between his car and my car, and it caused enough injury to me that I was forced to take a medical disability. I did that in 1999. I developed kind of a severe rheumatoid arthritis, and based upon all of the injuries and that on top of it, I've been diagnosed by 5 different doctors to kind of be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So I chose not to.
Wow. So, yeah, so, the whole thing we're trying to do with our live broadcast here is really teaching people about mindset, right? And one of the important things that I tell people is that it always starts with a decision. Whether it's something, a progressive thing that you're trying to do, like your own business and things like that, but mostly it's how people are being prevented by depression, anxiety, things like that. So I kind of want to know, let's talk about how did you feel when, what's the first thought that went in your head when you were told like you're probably never going to be able to walk again?
Well, I can start back with the fact that when I sat in front of a board of individuals and they handed down to me a retirement that I wasn't expecting, because my career most of my other colleagues have gone on to be captains and commanders and police chiefs and sheriffs and deputy sheriffs, under sheriffs and things like that. So my first, I guess, hint at any kind of depression, anger, anxiety came from the fact that I was told I would no longer be a police officer. So I had to deal with that first and foremost.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a jolt to all of us. It was a jolt both physically, emotionally, and financially to my
Yeah.
whole family, actually. During the time period that I was being diagnosed with my disability and getting the process, I should go back because it's been a little while now. Is that about 20? What is that? 22 years? Yeah, 22 years. I'm giving my age away just a little. That's like 22 years ago. So
Yeah.
during that time period, when you go through a retirement board, especially for an occupational disability of some type, you have to see a series of doctors before they determine whether or not you are disabled or whether or not you are able to go back to work or go back to half duty, full duty, 3/4 duty, this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So after I had gone through the one step from sitting in front of a panel of about 12 people who told me that we are granting you your disability, I then had to listen to the 5 doctors who then, one by one, basically saw 4 of them, got their diagnosis, which would turn into a 5th doctor. That 5th doctor was kind of like the chief surgeon, head doctor.
Okay.
And between all 5 of them, the diagnosis was that I would be in a wheelchair and then basically in a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So that ride home from, I used to live in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
I worked and lived in the Colorado Springs area. We had to go to Denver where the FPPA was housed. That was an extremely
Oh,
long drive home.
yeah. Jeez.
Still brings a little emotion to me because it was kind of a twofold thing. I was told, number one, I would never work in law enforcement again. Number
Yeah.
two, that I could expect myself to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I went through all the stages, just if you lost somebody.
Right. Right. Oh, looks like you got muted there. Why are you muted? I think your mic fell off or something. Can't seem to unmute you. No, it's still muted. I'm not sure. Technical difficulties, everybody. Yes, so I mean, so far from what I've heard, I mean, that's got to be devastating. So one of the things, because it gets rid of your purpose or your sense of purpose, and that can really be devastating to your life. And that you can easily, go down to depression with that. Yeah, I'm not sure why your mic is on mute. I don't know if it just kind of went out. So it says your mic isn't connected. So not sure what that's about. But yeah, but anyone that's watching right now, so Michael Herst is just telling us his story. He was diagnosed to never walk again. He was a police officer that got into, an accident or whatever. And then through years, he got his arthritis and all this stuff. And they told him he's never going to walk again. And the reason this is so important for me to kind of talk to people about this is because he's dealing with something or he dealt with something that was, I mean, very difficult to go through, right? Obviously, that goes into depression. And I have to tell people all the time that depression is just the result. The same reason happiness is, or the same way happiness is also a result. People just don't have happiness, and that's why they're happy. It's the same way people don't have depression, that's why they're depressed. And I know a lot of people are walking around with that idea that as if they have this imaginary or this invisible enemy called depression, but really it's your perspective, your thought pattern, everything else, your habits. It's basically that's all it really is. If that's not the case, then why do we talk to therapists? Because all they do is talk to you. They don't give you a magic pill or anything like that. And really, their main goal, just like reading a book or movies, is really just to help change your perspective. And hopefully, that's what we do for you today. Looks like your mic is back on.
I think it is. I'm sorry about that.
Oh,
I don't
there
know
you
why
are.
they did that.
Oh, all good, all good. So yeah, so now we know you got diagnosed. So what's the what kind of happened after that? Did you just go downhill? What happened?
Well, basically, I started going downhill. The rheumatoid arthritis really took a very large impact on my life, and during that time period, the worse it got, the rheumatologist that I went to see kept trying different drugs on me. So during a very short period of time, they tried 3 different drugs on me, and each one of them caused an allergic reaction to where they were not being able to be used in my system.
Yeah.
One of them, they actually had to use another drug to wash it out of my system. It was that bad for me.
Wow.
So they got me into another drug trial for Humira. And during this point, and I need to put a disclaimer out here. This is my experience with Humira. This is not, Ricardo.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with what they're saying. This is my experience with Humira. So during this time period, I helped them. It started to work for me. So we saw remarkable results, and I became a spokesperson for them for a little while because it gave me back a partial active life, which was pretty good. During that time period, though, at the end of, I think, 5 years that I was on it with them, the FDA went and approved the drug because I was helping to get it approved. Once it got approved, they asked me if I wanted to continue on the drug, if I would continue to be a spokesperson for them. So I agreed.
Yeah.
During that time period, unbeknownst to me, closer to the 7-year mark, around 2010, I went from 165 pounds to 100 pounds in a matter of like 4 months.
That's crazy.
It was absolutely crazy. I mean, I saw every specialist that you could think of, and nobody could figure out why. And they finally sent me to an oncologist, and the oncologist, because we thought I had cancer. One of the side effects of Humira is actually a cancer, 2 different types of cancer.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, maybe the Humira caused the cancer.
Okay.
So we went there, which brought a whole new set of depression, anger, resentment, anxiety, because my father died of cancer at 39. My grandparents died of cancer. My stepfather died of cancer.
Yeah.
I've had 2 uncles and an aunt die of cancer.
So you're stressing, man.
So I'm stressing really bad. And it was
That'll
depressing.
do it. That'll do it.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. Plus, we couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So when I hit the 100-pound mark, they finally sent me to this oncologist. And he, wonderful oncologist, hematologist. And after he did all his testing, he came back and said, hey, I know what's wrong with you. And he said, you have rheumatoid cachexia, and it's caused by Humira.
Oh, wow.
So basically, if you look at cancer patients when they're on chemotherapy, you see they get emaciated and they can't keep a muscle mass. That's caused by the drug which is a biologic. Humira is a biologic.
Okay.
Humira is a tumor necrosis factor inhibitor, is what it is. So I was getting the same exact symptoms as a cancer patient and losing weight and muscle. It's kind of a muscle wasting is what it really, layman's terms, it's a muscle wasting.
Okay.
So he immediately took me off that drug. By that time, I was back in the wheelchair, and that was 2010.
Yeah.
So I lost hope for a long time, actually. I lost hope. We weren't sure exactly what we were going to do. He said, you can't, I couldn't take the other 3 Humira, or not Humira, but the other 3 rheumatoid drugs that were out on the market because I had allergic reactions to all 3 of them. Humira was like my last resort.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that they were giving me expired medication for 17 weeks. That's what caused the severe reaction. Well, that reaction caused me to lose all that weight, and then it put me back in a wheelchair, which I had worked very hard to stay out of.
Yeah, right.
So I went back into all the phases of depression and anger and resentment and
Because now you're back in a wheelchair again.
the back in a wheelchair.
Oh, son
So
of
yeah, so I
a.
spent probably 4 years
Back in the wheelchair.
in that wheelchair. I spent
Never
4
got
years
up.
in the
Four
wheelchair.
years.
Well, I mean, my daughters had to help me up. My wife had to help me up. My brother-in-law, whoever happened to be around, had to help me up in and out of there, help set me down in a chair. And
Yeah.
let me tell you, to go from a police sergeant, not
Yeah.
being egotistical,
Yeah. Yeah.
but to
Yeah.
go from a police sergeant and a father and a husband and a strong man to
Yeah.
having somebody lift me in and out of a chair,
Oh,
or
devastating.
without being rude, put me on and off the toilet.
Yeah.
You take a hit
Yeah.
on your self-esteem, and you take a hit on your your self-awareness for where you stand in life, basically.
Yeah. So
So
that makes sense. And it's funny because that's basically what happens to people that get into depression and stuff without having that happen to them. And I always have to emphasize, depression is the result of their thinking, of how their thought pattern is and their perspective on life. And that's what really ruins you. It's not because of the past, what happened to you. It's what you can't now see in your future, because now you're there going like, man, how am I, how is this going to work now? With me in a wheelchair, I'm supposed to be the sergeant. I'm supposed to be the dad. I'm the father. And that's what you've seen for your entire life, was this blueprint of this is how I was going to grow old. And now basically you're told like, nope, that's actually not how it's going to work today,
yeah,
And so, it's difficult to see that. At what point, because this is very important, at what point did you, basically they're telling you can't get up, right?
well,
When did you
basically,
decide not to believe that, or like what happened? Where's the transition period?
realistically, this was taking a toll on all of my family, my
Yeah.
kids, my wife, my marriage, took my toll on everything. So, about a year and a half before my oldest daughter got married, my goal was to walk her down the aisle.
Ah, gotcha.
So I chose that, and she said, "Dad," it's gonna bring tears to my eyes. "Dad, I want you to walk me down the aisle."
Wow.
So I made a concerted choice, and I says, "I'm not going to play this game anymore." And I sought out other remedies, and I started seeking out other opportunities to control and manage my disease
Right.
and to strengthen myself and to find solutions to things.
So
So,
yeah. So this is this is probably the most important part of our conversation today. Why? Because that is basically the starting point of you making that switch, because a lot of people think that you have to figure out the solutions first of the problems, and then you decide to get better once you know what the solution is. That's totally not the way. Once you make the decision, all of a sudden you start seeing the solutions. Some people call this the law of attraction, but it's really just the power of the decision, right? Once you make that decision, all of a sudden you go, all right, well, I got to walk my daughter to, on her wedding. What do I need to do? Well, what am I, right?
well, exactly. And I mean, and obviously, I need to really put this out there. She wasn't my only motivation. It was also my wife and
Yeah,
my youngest daughter.
right.
It was a family thing. I did not want to be a burden to any of these people any longer. I made a choice, and that choice motivated me to find solutions. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
anybody else is in this particular position, you need to reevaluate where you stand, where you're at that moment,
right.
and you the best gift that we have from the universe, from God, universe, whatever you believe, even if you believe from spiritual perspective, is
Hmm.
that we have free will. Free
Yep,
will is the opportunity to make a choice. And if you do not choose to change your circumstances, then
right,
you never will change your circumstances. You will
right.
not move forward. You need to make that first step. You need to take that first step in order to change who and what you are in that current circumstance.
Yeah, totally agree. And for people that are watching, the thing about choice is that you never truly know what the right choice is going to be, but it's really how you're going to deal with the consequences. And even that is a choice. How you're going to respond to the consequence of the result or whatever. And so, this is really important because, I go through, been talking to so many different professionals and stuff. And we kind of talked about this a little bit before we got on. And I tell them all the time that that's where it all starts, is with that decision. And then once you make that decision, that's where everything follows. And what that means is that you're accountable for your happiness, for your result, right? Because happiness is just a result, the same way depression is. Because you're in depression because of a choice, like you kind of chose to. And I know people have a hard time dealing with that, and no one likes to be told, because again, when we're in a bad place, we tend to hate accountability and we tend to love excuses, to the point you get angry at people when, they think you're like, hey, what do you mean? It's not me. It's the chemical imbalance, man. Like, well, he's got rheumatoid arthritis issues. Like, that's way more than chemical imbalance. But guess what he did, right? And and really, the biggest, the one of the things that I've really talk about, right? When people are in their depressive states, and I mean, they always say it's chemical imbalance. And the thing is, it's like, all right, of course they're gonna have chemical imbalance because they're depressed. When you have depression, or when you're depressed, your stress response kicks in. So your cortisol, all that stuff. That's why you're chemically imbalanced. And it even actually hurts us in other physical ways, not just just the stress response. The cortisol can make cancer. Just loneliness is actually worse than 15 cigarettes a day. So there's a lot of things that result from just simply your mindset being, in a bad perspective. So, having your mindset like that is really important to me. Do you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I agree with you 100%. And, in my circumstance, my daughter initiated it by saying, I want you to walk me down the aisle.
Yeah,
But I had to make that choice.
right. It's always up to you.
Exactly. So I could have said, well, you're going to roll me down the aisle. I
Right,
could have not. I had to make that choice.
right.
And when you look at life, I grew up in a very toxic environment as a child. And not to go into a huge aspect of it, but
Yeah.
part of my experience, my life experience, is the fact that I grew up in an environment with two alcoholic parents.
Okay.
Both my parents are gone; they're passed away.
Yeah.
My parents fought constantly, so I was in that negative environment.
Yeah.
My father was only 39 years old when he passed away.
Oh, wow.
I was, yeah, I was 17. Prior to that, I hadn't seen him for 3 years. So it's when you come from an environment, even if you come from an environment like that,
Yeah.
you have to learn, because that's a very depressive environment in itself.
Yeah.
And there are people that take there are people that take separate paths. There are people that say, okay, well, my parents were alcoholics, so I'm going to be an alcoholic. It's
Right.
hereditary, so that's my excuse.
Right. Right.
That they did it, so I can do it, kind of a
Right.
situation. But
Right.
you, I'm just trying to emphasize what you said: the fact that you have free will, you have to make a choice. Even with depression, you have to make a choice.
Yeah.
And there are a multitude of solutions out there. You just have to be willing to open your eyes to look for them.
Right. Exactly. It's the same thing. I always relate. The easiest thing to relate with is your physical health, right? There's millions, so many ways of losing weight. There's
Yeah,
so many ways, and it's different for everyone. I get it. But that's just the result of things. It's what are you doing that's causing it, though, right? And it really takes a decision. No one just loses weight because they didn't decide to lose weight and go, oh, I just happened to lose weight, I don't know what happened. Like,
exactly.
it's a decision you have to make. You have to say, like, you know what, I'm going to do it. And one of the things that I've been telling people now, when they talk about like chemical imbalance or basically excuses, it could be anything really. um, I go with situations like yours, with cancer, for example. My question to anyone now is, does everyone with cancer die? They know it's no, right?
Right.
No, they don't. Why? What happened? How did they do that then? Because that's what we need to figure out with depression. It's kind of like when someone has depression, like, oh, that's it. It's pills forever. You're telling me no one got out of depression ever, ever. So let's look at the ones that got out of it. So how did they do it? Was it always with a pill? I don't think so. Because then what the hell do therapists give them? Nothing. So when I tell people, like, well, how about people with cancer, right? The first thing, what do you think? Actually, let me ask you first. What's the first thing that happens, you think, for people that beat cancer? Like, how do they do it?
Well, I can tell you from a personal perspective, my sister beat cancer twice.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So in that success story, she is a survivor.
Yeah.
And she made the conscious choice that she was not going to let that cancer beat her. She made that
Ding, ding, ding,
conscious
ding.
choice.
Right.
Exactly. She
Right.
said, it's not going to win. I'm going to win.
Right.
Even after it came back and hit her for the second time, she
Right.
had to do that again and say, I made a conscious choice, a conscious choice
Right.
to not let this take my life and take control
Oh,
of my life. Now,
that's exactly.
she is fearful for obvious reasons. She's fearful for it coming back,
Yeah.
but she takes a proactive approach in
Right.
order to maintain her health at
Right.
such a level that it doesn't give opportunity for the cancer to come back up again.
Exactly. And it's the same exact process for depression. What are you
Yeah.
proactively doing that is going to prevent that? But at the same time, you have to differentiate which one, because it's just a response, right? What part of it was natural? Because if you lose someone and you don't get depressed, that's weird, because that really means you just
Right.
didn't love them. You're supposed to get depressed. When you get a divorce, you're supposed to get depressed, or else you actually didn't love the other person, or you didn't really care. You're supposed to. That's actually the proof that you loved someone, or because of the loss, you feel a sense of loss. If you don't feel a sense of loss, then that's what's weird. So I don't know when depression became abnormal, and and that's the one thing I emphasize. So, like you said, the common denominator of anyone that beat cancer is the first thing is, nope, no, I am not going to let this win. I'm going to beat it. That's the very, very first thing. And all of a sudden, guess what happens? Diet changes. All of a sudden, exercises. All of a sudden, reading books. All of a sudden, all the solutions start coming at you. But until that decision, if your sister, right?
Sister.
If your sister never made that decision, what do you think would have happened?
Well, she'd enter the same realm as the rest of a large portion of my family.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And
She'd
that was
follow
the
suit.
only thing that said, nope, not me.
Well, and honestly, Ricardo, that happens in any aspect of life. You
Exactly.
know, it's just like my disease. Rheumatoid arthritis is a very debilitating, devastating disease.
Yeah.
You see commercials for it on TV constantly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
take this drug, take that drug, take this drug. And when you look at the list
Right.
of side effects that come with it, and I can tell you because I've experienced just about every one of them. Okay,
Wow.
they are nasty, nasty side effects. Okay,
Wow.
I chose to manage my disease with a more naturopathic approach, and I make a conscious choice every day in what I eat, how I meditate, how I
Right.
use mind, body, soul, how I stay focused, how I know that if I eat this, it inflames me. I'm in bed for a week. If I
Yeah.
don't eat this, it's not. I find an alternative to what I can eat. Every day is a conscious choice to stay this way.
And
And
that, yeah, and that's basically how it works. It's kind of like, weight, your obesity. It's like, unless you eat right, there's no better time to eat right and exercise than today. So I was talking to somebody, he said 95% of it is diet. And to me, it's the same thing with your mental health. It's like, well, what's your mental diet? Like, if you're not forgiving your past issues, or if you think you're never good enough because of what one friend said or your dad said, or that's going to stay with you until you change that, but that's the cause of your pain and what you're going through. And so until you handle that, it's never going to fix itself. And it's that conscious decision to do that. And it's like, and I love what because then I can actually compare. I've only talked about this theoretically and stuff, but now you're the actual person. And this is a great example. So Michael is a great example of how you prevent depression, anxiety, all this stuff. It's preventative, it's proactive, it's intentional. It's not something that just happened. He didn't just get better,
I had to work at it. I had to work at it. And,
right.
and be honest with you, I've got my wife and my daughters have been diagnosed with depression. They primarily manage their depression with meditation and with mind-body balance.
Yeah.
They know when they're having a bad day. They know when they're in a particular mood, or if they're in a particular area. They take a proactive approach every day. My wife meditates with me every morning. My wife meditates in the evening. My wife, whenever she feels like she needs to take a break, she goes and meditates for a few minutes and allows her body to regenerate and to stop the negative side of it, and kind of be grateful for where she's at in the moment. And that helps her to move forward in her battle, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So that's how I see kind of the mental health. I always try to say something that people can relate with. Meditation, diet, all that stuff, those are all the exercises, right? It's kind of like exercise for the physical, it's the exercise for the mind. But when it comes to physical health, there's also the diet part. So you have to really look at what the mental diet is. What type of thoughts are you mentally taking in? So you have to consider that. It's kind of like eating McDonald's every day, but you're going to the gym. It's going to be tough to maintain health that way, right? So you really have to figure out, you have to do kind of both. Same thing when you're doing meditation, you have to figure out what's causing the pain too. Are you in a bad work environment, a job that you hate? Are you in a really bad relationship? Because like what we were talking about earlier, sometimes it's just environmental, right? Like it's the outside force that you just keep. So your stress response is kicking in every freaking time because you're dealing with so much crap that it doesn't matter how much meditation you have if you're getting your butt kicked by your husband. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't help. Of course it helps. But until you get rid of that, also your mental diet sucks. Well, you're just basically plateauing, and you're not actually getting better, or basically not losing weight.
And I agree with that. I mean, even with depression, coming from an individual that I battled it numerous times in numerous aspects of my life. I battled it, and I have to battle it occasionally because when I have a flare up, it brings a certain amount of depression back into my life. Because I still have a disease, and sometimes I do flare up. But I know the root of my depression. I understand it. I agree with you in that other perspective. People need to understand the root of where their depression comes from. You need to, it's the old adage, you need to know your enemy in order to overcome that enemy.
Exactly.
You got to know your enemy. So, if you are in a position or in a situation that allows that depression to come back to you every day, then you need to find a solution to remedy that.
Right.
Either remove yourself from that situation or find a proactive approach in a way to make the situation positive.
Right. No matter what, any kind of prevention is always proactive, whether it's diabetes, bullying, you know what I mean? Like those are just all results. And I don't know why it's something, I can't believe it's something I have to tell people because as a society, right, we've really changed how we perceive mental health. And to me, you're only hurting them more. It's kind of like giving everyone a trophy as a kid. I know it sounds great, man. Like, I know it makes the kid feel good. But the results of that, is it beneficial? or not? That's my thing. It's like, is it going to be beneficial when they grow up? And I believe that suicidal tendencies are increasing with kids because they don't know how to deal with loss. You keep spoiling them not to feel it. Well,
Exactly.
what do you think is going to happen with their first breakup? It's the end of the world. Even when you go through loss, the first breakup sucks.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
So
You
imagine if
you
you never
remember
felt
it.
that
You
pain
remember it
before.
for life. It's
Yeah, imagine if
you're
you
kind of
never
tucked
felt
away.
that pain before. Now you're like, oh my God. And so that's why you end up getting suicidal. So, when they're kids, they're in training. Like, you don't have to be their best friend. You're supposed to teach them how to deal with things, how to survive on their own later on.
Well, and it's interesting. One of my guests that I had on the show one time,
Yeah.
they were from England, and there were two people that I interviewed both at the same time. They're called mental heads, and their perspective comes from both female and a male perspective, and the differences between how they're treated and the stigma behind it.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, the Paul, the male individual, I won't give any last names, but he um, worked and lived here for quite some time,
Okay.
and he worked in the aeronautics arena. So, with regard to that, he said it was bizarre that when he was here, if you suffered from, let's say, you alcoholism or
Yeah.
a drug addiction or something,
Yeah.
that the people from his employers would pat you on the back and say, "Good job for noticing that. Well done for kind of taking a proactive approach. Go into rehab. When you get out of rehab, everything's going to be great. You come back to work, and everything's cool."
Yeah.
But anytime somebody mentioned in the word depression or anxiety or
Yeah.
bipolar or anything like that,
Yeah.
it was, well, we should start the paperwork, and we don't know if you're a good fit here anymore.
No
So
way.
the differences between the stigma around depression, between here and like England, for example, England, they get you help. They find you help. They get you help. It's very proactive in the United Kingdom
Yeah.
compared to here, where it becomes a stigma, or it becomes, like he said, it becomes easy. So if they make a joke out of it, you're on Xanax or you're on, um, I can't remember some of these other popular, since I don't take them.
Prozac and yeah. I don't know.
Prozac and things like this. They make a joke out of it
Yeah.
because they're so easily, go take a Prozac, go take a Xanax, go do this,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
do that, go do this.
Yeah.
That'll take care of you. They don't take depression seriously enough here, I don't think.
Huh. Really? That's definitely a different take. I know sometimes though you can get a little too much because I heard in the UK, I interviewed somebody and he's like 1 out of 4 are on antidepressants. And it's just like 1 out of 4?
Wow.
Like that's a lot. And that's why I feel like that doesn't make any sense. It's like, why are you on antidepressants? Because like, well, what's really causing it? Because you're not even looking to solve the issue, and all you're doing is remedying the result. It's kind of just like I always pertain to freaking diabetes. It's just like, oh, so you're taking freaking insulin, but you're still eating sugar. Got it. All right.
It's exactly.
Like, okay.
Yeah, my stepfather had diabetes,
Okay.
and the thing that he said is that I can choose to go eat when I'm not supposed to,
Yeah.
but that I choose a faster route to dying.
Yeah.
That was his analogy.
Huh.
I goes, I can choose to go eat everything I want to eat. I
Yeah.
can go and eat all the sugar I want
Right.
and eat all the ice cream I want,
That's
but
right.
I may wake up dead tomorrow.
That's right. Exactly.
You
That's
know,
right. And it's funny when people don't take accountability, when people get, like we were talking about earlier, when people get cancer, the first thing they do is make that decision like, no, I'm going to win. I'm going to fight this. But when it comes to depression, I rarely hear that because they're in a bad state of mind. But they don't go like, you know what? Nope, I'm not going to have depression beat me in this. I'm going to beat this. And that's the first freaking step, man. Like that's the very first step. And they actually get offended if they want you to think that way, which is weird, but it's because they're in a bad state of mind. All of us get there all the time. It's because we motivate too soon. When we're in a bad place, we love our excuses. We don't like the accountability part. It's never our fault. You can't do that right away and say, well, it's all about you, man, So you really have to be careful with that. But at the same time, it's like, I have to tell you, but that you are accountable for your happiness. Like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you the facts that that's where it comes from, or else you're never going to get any better. You're not going to get rid of cancer until you decide I'm going to beat cancer.
Well, exactly. Can I share two stories with you?
Yeah, of course.
I've had two friends of mine that I worked with,
Yeah.
and one of them was godfather of my kids. Both of them I had known for over 30 years, and one was a police officer, one was a firefighter, EMT.
Okay.
They both had PTSD. Both of
Okay.
them had incidents in their careers that had caused such PTSD, such depression that they hit it. So in that particular job, you're not allowed to show depression or anger or emotion. You
Yeah.
can't cry. You can't cry. You can't yell. You can't scream. You're not allowed to get depressed
Huh.
because of the position you're in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Both of them committed suicide.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it because our body is efficient. Depression is actually like a necessary response. It's like
It is.
but either way, it's a choice, how you're responding. But at the same time, sometimes that's how your body copes. When you lose someone, it goes through the depression. Unless you embrace the pain, you're almost never going to appreciate the pleasure.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And you have to go through the process. And, the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Acceptance is where you want to get to. And you have to go through these stages. Sometimes you skip, sometimes you go back and forth. But typically, depression is the last stage before you go to acceptance. And it's always the hardest. It's supposed to
Yeah.
be. Like, it's supposed to be. Just like a marathon, the finish line is the hardest. Final exams in college is the hardest. Like, it's not the beginning ones. It's not the beginning of the marathon,
Yeah.
at the very end. And when people are depressed, I tell them, good, you're almost there. Because that means you're going through the process. That means you're embracing it. That means you're going through it. People get into alcoholism and drug abuse. It's actually because it numbs the pain. That's why they.
Exactly. And I think part of my point that I wanted to help clarify with that is it's okay to be depressed.
Yep.
It's okay that you shouldn't put a stigma behind
Right.
it.
It's staying there forever is the issue.
Exactly. You're allowed to be depressed. You're allowed,
Right.
but you have to move forward.
It's a
You have to
natural
move on.
response.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with anxiety. We tend to look at anxiety and depression and really pigeonhole that into this mental health issues. But it's the same thing as happiness and anger. Like, they're all emotions and they're all responses.
Exactly.
And for you to try to get rid of an emotion is insanity. That's like trying to get rid of anger. That if you stub your toe, that if you get angry, it's like, oh man, I've been dealing with anger for like 15 years, Michael. Like, I've been dealing with depression for 16 years now. Like, it's an emotion, right? It's always going to happen. If you never feel that again, that's freaking odd. And you are going to be a serial killer. Like, that's not a good sign if you never feel depression ever again or anxiety ever again. Oh man, my anxiety's kicking up. Why? Oh man, anxiety's kicking up. Well, you're about to talk to a crowd full of people. Like,
Exactly.
you're supposed to get anxious
You
because
need
you don't
this.
know what the future holds. Any type of emotion and things like that, it tends to be about the future. It's never really the past or the present. I mean, sometimes it's the present sometimes too when you're experiencing it, but mostly it's the future. Fear of what's going to happen,
Yep.
and that's just how your brain works. It's what you think's going to happen. Like, look at the pandemic. Nothing's happening to you right now. You're in your home. You're safe. You're good.
Yep.
But it's what you think of the future that's really killing you. And that's what's putting you in depression and anxiety and all these things, because what you think, it's just an assumption. It's not even real. You don't even know. You don't know what's going to happen. You have no clue. But you assume that your future is completely shot. So you go into the anxiety and then you get into depression, right?
Yep. And you're allowed to do that for a little bit.
Right. And that's the thing. The thing is, when you do feel that, you know what anxiety is, you know what depression is. When you know the cause, it's easier to manage it and control it and to figure it out. everyone goes through it. I have freaking, a startup company, and sometimes I feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna kill and rule the world. And then there's ones that it's not gonna make it.
Exactly.
So I
Well,
always go back and forth. Always, perspective is always shifting. Always, inspiration brings you here, and trauma brings you here.
exactly. And something you said just a few minutes ago,
Yeah,
management, management,
yeah,
management. Everything is management, at least in my life, in my lifetime, in my experience with family members, my
yeah,
experience with not only my disease, me going through depression, anger. I went through PTSD. I still see faces of
yeah,
every death I ever saw,
yeah,
every accident scene I ever went to, every homicide I ever went to.
yeah,
They still stick with me. I
mhm,
still have PTSD. The key to any of that, including depression, and I'm not a doctor, I'm telling you from personal experience,
yeah,
is management.
yeah. Exactly. And the hard part, so what I'm trying to get people to learn also is when you keep referring to how you're feeling, and the cause is the noun, it actually hurts you. Like, I know a lot of people that say my PTSD, but at least you actually know it's because when I can see the faces, I'm seeing the faces, that's what's causing it. But when you say PTSD, now you're no longer fighting anything, because you at least know, oh man, I keep visualizing these things. Like, all right, I have to figure out a way right now to stop myself from visualizing that, because the result is going to be, I'm going to get depressed if I keep
Right,
thinking about this. And so
right,
that's really where it comes from. I wish more people would do what you're doing rather than just saying PTSD and then not saying what's causing it, right? It's just like, oh,
right,
PTSD, like that's not going to help you. If it's, oh, my depression's acting up. But in reality, it's like, oh, I still can't let go of the divorce that I just recently had. Like that's now the cause. It's like, all right, now I can help you because it's your
right.
perspective on your divorce, because you think you're never going to find anyone else and you're going to be unhappy forever. Like that's the problem. That's the cause. Not I have depression. Well, the only thing you can do about that is pills. Like that's why
Right.
we resort to it. You
Well, the
know?
pills, in my opinion, I know that, again, there's supposed to be a scientific explanation for a chemical response in that they realign the chemical, either inhibitor or receptors in regard to
Right.
managing how you respond to something.
Right.
But I need to let everybody know that not only is the key to managing your depression or managing what's happening to you in life at the moment, you need to communicate, and
Yeah.
you need to not be afraid to communicate,
Right.
because
Right.
if you do not talk about it, and you're afraid to talk about it, or if you're afraid to tell somebody because you think of what they're going to think of you,
Right.
I will tell you from personal experience. Okay, I would rather have had John and Tim call me and talk to me than I would to think they're a tough guy and
Yeah.
trying to push through it.
Yeah. And not only that, because communication actually helps you. It's we're just very social beings. And in a chemical sense, by talking about it, by being around people, that's why love is important. And I don't think that, again, it's like, I'm not saying don't take these, medicine or whatever. I know that it changes your biological thing, obviously, but that the problem I have with it is that it's artificial. It's the same reason with
Yep,
diabetes and taking insulin. It's artificial. It's outside of your body that you're just putting in because of your bad diet. Well, your mental diet is actually the cause of it. So don't just go like, oh, well, this pill changes my chemical imbalance. And it's like, yeah, temporarily,
right.
but you're still thinking about your dad. You're still thinking about these faces. So it's like until you change your perspective on that, it'll always haunt you forever, because
Exactly.
until you change your perspective on what you did. But if you change it of your perspective on what you see and how you see your future actually ends up helping you change the way you view your past. That's why people always say like, well, I guess everything happens for a reason. You didn't say that when you were in a shitty place though. But
Yeah.
now when you're in a better place, oh, so that had to
Yeah.
happen for you to be in a better place. But no one ever says that when you're in a shitty place, ever, right? You got divorced. Oh, I guess everything happens for a reason. That's why you're unhappy, dude. Like
Exactly.
you're getting punished. You're under the assumption that they're going to have a good future. That's the only reason you say that. And I always tell people, so I don't like things that are inconsistent. I tell people that's what they're really trying to tell you, is that you have to find things to make things happen, or find the reasons to make things happen. Not everything happens for a reason, because
Right.
everything happens for a reason. It's just bullshit, really. Hey, where there's a cause, there's an effect, Michael.
Yep.
Yeah, no shit. If your great great grandfather didn't go with your great great grandmother, you wouldn't be here. Like, yeah, so, but what does that do for me? Absolutely nothing. It doesn't empower me whatsoever. And so it's just stupid when people say that to me. But I get why they're saying it. It's just the reason they're saying it. But sometimes we get stuck in that stuff.
Well, everybody's journey is unique.
Yep.
If I can say that, everybody's journey is unique. And in regard to that, again, everybody has a choice. You
Yeah.
can take the left path, you can take the right path. Determining which path you take takes work.
Yeah.
And you have to have a conscious effort in order to decide to take that path. And when you decide to take that path, you can have bumps in the road.
Right.
But you have to persevere. Like I told you at the beginning of this program, I manage my disease, a debilitating disease,
Yeah.
with my diet, with meditation, and with exercise.
Right.
I've had 5 operations. On each one of my operations, I literally was released on an average 6 weeks before the average individual. And I have a disease. It's because I chose to take a proactive approach in the way I manage my disease.
Exactly.
And you could do the same thing with depression.
Exactly.
I have to manage and keep in check my depression, because there are triggers. When we went back to the PTSD,
Yeah. Yeah.
from my personal perspective, there are triggers that I will watch something, or I will see something, or I will be watching a television program,
Right.
and those visions come back.
Right.
Or, I investigated five suicides on one Christmas Eve.
Oh, my God.
5 suicides on one Christmas Eve. Okay.
Oh,
That's not something it's easy to let go. And
yeah.
I'm sharing this with everybody so that you understand that no matter what you've been faced with, that's tough. I
Right.
mean, that is
That's
to go knock
man,
on somebody's door, and
that's
they're having a Christmas party, and they're going, "Hey, Merry Christmas. How you doing? Hey, come on in." And you say, "I'm sorry, but I need to talk to you out here."
oh,
And you deliver this kind of news, you just destroyed somebody's life during Christmas time because of
yeah.
that.
Right.
For delivering the news, I can say you destroyed it, or I destroyed it, but it's something that just ruined that. So that every Christmas, they're going to remember that same thing.
Right. That's going to be the trauma.
Uh-uh.
And what happens with trauma, people get fixated. So as human beings, we're evolving constantly.
Mhm.
The Michael from 5 years ago, 10 years ago is completely different than today. And it's going to be completely different for 10 years from now. And what I've seen, trauma, actually, that's what it does. It like fixates you. Sometimes it just keeps you in the past. And what you're doing is you're attempting to stop the evolution, but you've already changed because of the trauma. And you think like, yeah, but I want to be the person before the trauma, though, like right before I saw that shit. And it's like, well, that's why you're hurting, because you keep trying to. It's better for you to evolve now and say
Exactly.
you've changed, and learn from it. That's why they say you just learn from it, appreciate the situation, appreciate your loved ones now. Then that's what you do. Take that as a story of a reminder to appreciate life more and things like that. So when you can change your perspective on certain situations, that's actually what helps you out, and then it helps you basically evolve better, or
Right.
actually to keep evolving, because you're trying to stop it, and it's already too late. And like something you kept emphasizing before, it's always a choice. It's always a choice. The response to what you're seeing visually is a choice. How are you responding to it? And I get it. It's not something that's unnatural what you went through. Obviously, dude, I still get weirded out because I saw Poltergeist as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. Like, if I never saw that, I wouldn't have been scared of the dark. Like, moving meat. Are you kidding me?
Or little blonde girls in front of TVs. Get away from the
You know
TV.
what
Get
I
away
mean?
from the TV.
Right. Hearing little girls' voices in the dark, like, that ain't right. Not anymore. So I get it. It's hard to get that out of you, but you have to know what's causing it, or else you're going to get stuck in that.
Exactly.
So I really just thank you for, sharing your story. And I hope that when people watch this, they can actually take that piece and know that, like, look what Michael did, man. Like, I know you're talking about chemical imbalance. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying you don't have depression. I'm not saying you don't have anxiety, but I'm telling you, just the way he handled his issue, his problem, it required a conscious effort to make that decision to go, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to stop it. And this is what I'm going to keep doing to prevent it. The same way we prevent obesity by exercising today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when you're 500 pounds. Well, I'm not 500 pounds yet. Like, yeah, but why wait? Like, why wait? So you have to do that with your mental health also. You have to think about what you're doing now, like what Michael's doing, meditating. It helps. Not saying it doesn't. I'm saying, dude, you need to do it proactively. That's the exercise of the mind, man.
Mind, body, soul. Everybody can see me, so I want to do this. Okay?
Nice.
I do this for a reason. Because I was told by 5 doctors I would never do that again.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Good for you, man.
So you have the ability, you have a choice, you have the ability to overcome anything, including the tendencies towards wanting to take your own life, the tendencies towards depression. And if you feel any of those, don't be afraid to ask. Please reach out and
Right.
ask. And you can do it anonymously. You don't have to call up your friend or your husband or your wife or your kids. You can do it anonymously. You just need to take a step in the right direction. You need to take a choice. You make a choice and kind of move forward.
Yeah.
And you can
once,
manage. You can manage
once
this.
you make that choice, those kinds of things is what happens. Because right now, when you keep saying, "Oh, depression it's something I can't do anything about," and but once you decide, like, no, I'm gonna do this, all of a sudden you reach out to friends. All of a sudden you talk about it. But until then, it really always. That's why it's start day one. Like, you have to start day one, man. And not saying you're gonna feel awesome in one day. That's like saying, freaking, if I do 50 push-ups, I'll lose 500 pounds. That's not how it's gonna work. It's gonna be a constant thing. But once you decide to do 550 push-ups a day for 50 years, I'm telling you right now, you might slowly lose weight. All of a sudden, you're gonna change your diet and stuff like that. And it's the same exact thing with your mental health. It's like, I'm telling you, once you decide, the solutions come to you. And that's what happens all the time. So
baby steps.
Right. Baby steps. And then you start walking again. Right? Baby steps and then you start walking. I like your analogy, Mike. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us in this episode, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad I got to share your story and your insight. I think it was really valuable hearing from someone going through what you went through and taking the steps, how you change your mindset, and that required someone to kind of push you, that gave you that incentive, like, hey, walk me down the aisle. Like, but no matter what, it was really your decision that made that happen, not what she said. That's just what kind of helped you, inspired you to do it. But that's about it.
And I will say that I did walk her down the aisle, and I did do the father-daughter dance.
Yes.
So,
That's a great ending. That was a great ending. So to anyone that wants to get in touch with him, he's got his podcast going on. He's doing the same thing. And I love that he's doing it, because we're all about the proactive, efforts in helping other people. So go to beforeyougopodcast.com. He's always interviewing different professionals, different stories, and really proactively trying to help people change their perspective, and so that they can actually have a more fulfilling life. So Thank you again, Michael. I definitely appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, until next time. See you guys.